All right, well, we hate to interrupt this great conversation. We also want to make sure we have enough time to talk about some of the skill sets that we've used in our work. So, Chip, if you want to lead this.
Sure.
Okay, so what we thought we would do is give each table an opportunity to report out to the group. And I think it's always good if you, just because another table said something, doesn't mean you don't have to repeat it. You can certainly make it shorter, but sometimes that can add to emphasis, so we can pick up on even stronger themes as they were discussed. So is there someone at table one who would be willing to kind of share and report out your discussion and things that came to light?
Okay, I'm on.
All right.
This is the answer to question the last one, number 5. What did your church do with a significant gift that was given, and how do we tell the story? So, had somebody come to my office last fall offering a stock option, $51,000. What can we do with it? Can the church use it? Good news is I gave them a bunch of different options, and they used all those options, which was really cool. So I had a story ready for them, and they used that. I guess that's lesson number 1. But challenge number 2 for that is, how did I thank them and how did I tell the story? So because it's a private gift, I didn't ask permission to tell the story. Certainly those in finance know, but they didn't know who the donor was. So I need to do that better. I need to go back to them and say, can I offer, without names, that this was given, blah, 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 blah. Because some people in leadership at least know a gift was given, but not who. The other thing is I've been trying to let them know along the way via email, and yes, a thank you note was sent, etc. But I've been trying to let them know how their gift is making a difference along the way. So something happened recently, and I sent them an email and said, by the way, this recently happened, and your gift empowered that to happen. So that was good. But yeah,
It's great.
Chip, can you mic the people that are talking?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give this to whoever's.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
yeah. By the way, I know you
You'll hold it against
did. Not, it's not.
Table 2. Anybody here? You can pick out themes if you don't want to work through the entire list. I'm going to set it in open.
You owe me. So we did talk about the difference that would happen between having an outside consultant and not having an outside consultant. And one of the guys at our table said that he ran a whole campaign himself, and I was pretty impressed with that. And our facilitator said, you know, in the churches where there's a low accountability and a low, what was the other one? They aren't accountable to a low invest. There was something else that said that it would be better to have an outside consultant. But in his congregation, people would be accountable, and he couldn't really drive it. Although he talked about how it really bore on his family, on his wife, and him to drive this campaign and to be doing it. So we talked a little bit the difference between inside and outside campaigns.
Thank you. So this added dimension of fundraising for a campaign can be taxing, without question. Yes. Anybody at this table who's ready to raise a hand, or do I need to drop the mic on the table again? All right. You're being encouraged.
What to share? I can share number 5, but we didn't talk about that as a group. We did just receive a $4,000 gift that was from an IRA, and I did ask the donor if he would write up an article of testimony for our newsletter.
Great.
So that's something. But we're also in a culture, a couple of us in this group, where we just don't talk about money. It's very private. It's mine. If we have no business at all asking me for it or knowing what I did, etc. So that's one of our biggest challenges. Good enough?
Thank you. So wrestling in the church, and I heard it over framed a little differently at this table, between fundraising and stewardship. But those can feel and perhaps function in different ways. So anything else that you guys would like to share from this table?
Yeah, I would like to speak on behalf of Table 5. You covered it.
Thank you, Kirk. We circle back here to table 4. I will not venture to do the same.
I got to start out. A couple of things about large gifts, I guess, and not that I ever went asking. One came through a bequest when somebody died, who was a big amount. It was like a $2 million, $2.5 million endowment. And one of the challenges that came for that church was interpreting the difference between that gift and their regular giving, and to be able to tell people, and they decided from the beginning, we're not going to fund our budget this way. And no matter what it earns, that's not what it's for, we're not going to fund it that way. And but to keep reminding people, because they'd say, well, we have all this money. No. And also for them to make an early decision that they would at least tithe outside the church on the proceeds of that. Another church in the area had a fire. They sent the tithe that year to them, and different things like that. So, and then we were talking about another thing. The church I serve now got an endowment, and the process of trying to encourage them to give the endowment to the church for the church's ministry without saying it's for this ministry only. Because in order to keep it nimble so that whatever the needs were at a given time, they'd be able to address that. So that's a process too. And, so those are a couple of things we talked about, my experiences.
That was great. Yeah, thank you. So one of which is donor intent. Megan and I work with that a lot to make sure that funds, especially permanent funds, are established in a way that there is some flexibility. You can ensure that they will provide or do something that will be needed for the long term. And the other point, which I think is a really important one, is not taking or not using non-renewable resources for a program that needs renewable funds. And I think that's a very, very good distinction. Thank you.
If I can add in, do you do gift agreements? And when you receive a gift for an endowment, is there a gift agreement that is used? Meaning it's not a contract. It kind of looks like one, but it states the purpose of what you want to use the money for.
I have 2 experiences with this, and you just heard about both of them, so no.
Okay. Okay, so I didn't put it into, so this is why this is part of the conversation, but I can give you a sample one of what we use at Hopkins. And part of the reason why we do that is because the biggest thing that you want to do in any type, so when you guys use the word stewardship, in my world it's a different, stewardship to me is thanking for a gift or showing impact of a gift. And your stewardship is everything. So when we work with donors, we look for work, wisdom, wealth, time, treasure, talent. And I think one of the things that any organization that you work for when you are dealing with people's money is you really need to make sure you're doing what their intent is. And so all that a gift agreement kind of does is it lays that down. So the church understands what the donor wants, and the donor understands the limitations of the church. And so in an example like that, what we have dealt with is many times people have created scholarships over the years at a school that they went to school. And it was 40 years ago. And at that time, that school was really great, and we were getting students from there. Well, now the school's changed, and we don't get any students from there. So we have a pot of money that just sits because we don't have students coming because it said this school only. So there's language that we use now that says preference and it protects you, but it also makes you do the right thing, and it also is a way to kind of talk about it with the donor in a way that makes them feel comfortable in understanding the big picture. So I can make sure I give that to you, or if not, I'll give you my email address and I can send you one. Okay.
Thanks, Megan.
Go
ahead.
Yeah.
We've been working at the church that we've been working on something just like that, where we have been putting language in that says that we will accept the gift for a specific ministry unless we receive enough money to fund that ministry, and then anything else will go into the general fund.
Yep.
And so that it's up front before people give.
Yep.
Before they give.
Yep. Yep, and we can give you examples. There's an endowment and then the general fund. It's just a good tool to have, and also it helps you think about what you would actually do with the money. So it's sometimes, you know, in an example like that, you might not have been waiting for someone to say, I'm going to give you $2 million. And it just helps you kind of think of the different ways that you would use that money and to communicate that with the potential donor. Okay.
Table 6, you've knocked your number down.
So we can, we didn't really talk about that. What did you talk?
So I'm going to address number 5 as a very personal. Tell us about my most significant gift. And I would say it came in a capital campaign 10 years ago, and it came because my friend, and I've said this to other people, Joe Tyson, said, look, I discovered I can divert $10,000 a year from what I'm paying in the pension, and I can give a significant gift to my church. And I had gotten a little $15,000 bequest from my aunt. I said to my wife, we weren't expecting that, so let's do the Joe Tyson and gift, and we were able to make the largest single gift we'd ever thought about in our lives. The teaching moment out of that was to say, in the church, I think, almost every ask is a chance to expand the donor's thinking. So I couldn't imagine a mid-5-figure gift. I could not conceive of that in our lives. And we got opened up into being able to do that more than once because Joe told his story and because the campaign asked. So now as a retired pastor, I recognize every ask has the capacity to expand the vision.
Thank you, Kent. And table 7, anybody else? Robin, you gave us a nice one.
I think one of the things we spoke about was number 2 and number 1 going together about how much of a difference it makes if you have lay people who are involved in doing the stewardship, running it and speaking to it and teaching it, and that's really important. And we were in various places on that in terms of whether we had that or not. In the church I'm currently serving, I inherited a committee it was called Finance and Stewardship. But they made it clear in the fall, hey, we're numbers crunchers. We don't do that stuff, so you better come up with other people. So I'm creating a stewardship committee, and I just had lunch this week with a fellow who agreed to be chair, and it's going to be primarily educational. It's going to be year-long. It's going to be about stuff in church every month to 6 weeks, some programmatic opportunities all year long, and that's the vision. We hope to get it launched by fall.
Great. Great. And number 2, I stopped by there. We were talking about the same thing. We were talking about finding the time to devote to fundraising. And it's so hard with all the other responsibilities that you have. And one of the best ways that you can is by setting up committees, because then you're kind of accountable to that committee. And so not only do you have a workforce, but it also has you also have a new boss in a sense. So you should report back to them, and it helps you make that more of a priority when you have so many competing factors. No.
I don't have to expose table 8. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So some of this might be data that you have already seen in some other sessions. We did ask to get a sense for what you may or may not have been exposed to already. Just about everybody uses the same data source when it comes to giving in the United States and philanthropy more broadly. So Giving USA 2014 is the most recent data that we have. As you can see, in terms of who is receiving much of the resources that are given away in this country, religion still captures the most significant piece of that. About 1/3 of every dollar, 33 cents out of every dollar, goes to some kind of church, parachurch, religious organization. Education, particularly our field of education, higher education, is second at 16, roughly half in terms of real dollars given away to our industry versus the church. And so still an incredibly significant portion of every dollar that is given away in this country goes to the places where you live, work, and serve. So we think that is very significant. Now, some of you might also know what those trends have looked like. So it still is a significant piece, but some would argue that the piece of the pie is shrinking. So even back in 1993, about 45% of every dollar, 45 cents on the dollar, was given to some kind of church religious organization. So while there's good news, there's also reason to be cautious, to be intentional, to ask questions about why that is changing. Have any of you seen any comments that you would like to offer on this now, or should we proceed?
I have a question.
Sure, John.
Question is, I've seen these figures before, but I've also noticed there's a trend of churches setting up independent 501c3s for various specific kinds of things. So to what extent is that reflected in this? So maybe it's not been as much of a decline as indicated because some of the other things get put in a different category. I'm asking, I don't know the answer.
I think it's a perfectly good question to ask. And part of the comments I'm going to make later on when I compare annual giving to major gifts, in higher education, I would argue that most of our growth has been in major gifts, not in annual giving. And so if the nature of gifts to the church, major gifts to the church, are coming through some other kind of 501c3, well, that could be funneling some of this off. So I don't have any data to suggest that for sure, but it sounds likely. It sounds like it could be possible.
Yes. Question I have is what's the overall pile of money that's being given away? Is that growing or shrinking?
It's growing.
Okay.
It's continued to grow.
So a lot of these other organizations are getting more, and maybe
Correct.
churches have been staying at the same time.
That's correct. And if you look at annual giving, well, I'll get to that later. But yeah, the point is that it is a bigger pie. It's absolutely a bigger pie. More money was given away in the last 2 years than had ever been given away before. It's general, although as a percentage of wealth in this country, it's not much larger. It's been relatively flat. So as GDP goes up, you're going to expect giving to go up. But as a percentage of net wealth, it's been very stable for probably 50 years. And it's only 1 to 2%. Okay, I'm now going to turn it over to my good friend Megan.
Okay. Thank you. So to echo what Chip said, I do think that the giving is increasing, and it's increasing in other areas because people are asking in other areas that might not have asked. So, places like universities, they've ramped up with development offices. We were actually just talking about when we got in the field 15, 18 years ago, no one really knew what development was. It wasn't something, like Chip said, that we said we wanted to do. I didn't even know what it was as a field. I thought I didn't want to work at some little nonprofit, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions I've made. Us hiring major gift officers or people to ask for money, we get called by headhunters all the time because there is a need for that. So I think part of that is other organizations are doing that exact thing. They're asking for money. And so what I wanted to talk to you about is, how do you identify your needs and donors in your parish, and tell you some of the things that we do at the university that you can also use in your own home and in your own area. So laying the groundwork, why fundraise, who's responsible, attitudes for success, and then we're going to talk and we're going to spend some time and we're going to do an exercise about how do you do your vision statement or your elevator speech. When someone says, what's special, what do you say? Do you have something that you think about? It's really important to kind of think about those things because you never know when that person comes up to you. It happens at the weirdest places. It's not always going to be when you're planning it. It could be while you're done on a Sunday afternoon, or a different time of the day or a different weekday. So we're gonna talk about some strategies about creating that and how to really think through those steps. So that's double, I think, so we'll just skip that. So why do we fundraise, right? So regardless of what organization that you're involved in, you fundraise because you have a need, or you want to either sustain what you're currently doing, or you want to increase something. And that can be something as far as space, that could be as services that you offer to a congregation, that could be services to the community, and it could just be to turn on the lights. And I think, a lot of times, we think about, we need something monumental to raise money for. We need to think of that big thing, but sometimes it's just to continue and maintain the services that you currently have, and that's an okay case. It's just describing that and making sure that the people that you're talking to know what that means, and that there's a cost of things these days. Not everything, we all don't have that money flowing in. Cash is harder to come across. People are not all of a sudden just giving you. We used to get gifts that people would just give us money and say, do what you want. Today's donor wants to know what you're doing with it. And that's where telling that story that you mentioned is so important, and using examples. And sometimes in a church community, that doesn't feel as comfortable. because some people are private. But what you don't also realize is some people will see other people doing things and they'll see the impact and then they'll realize they can do the same thing. And we're going to talk about that a fair amount tomorrow, and that is what we call stewardship. So, who is responsible? A lot of times, you might just think you're the only one that can fundraise, but that's not always the case. Volunteers are sometimes one of your best tools to fundraise. And those can be other parishioners, they could be community members, they could be people who are involved, and they could be, your church leaders who, they give your time, treasure, talent. And the thing is as we're talking about funds, never underestimate the other two, the time and the treasure, because so many times people focus on the money and they don't realize that those other people giving those other things actually help build that case for then the other person to make the money. So it all kinds of goes together. Like I said, we also call it work, wisdom, wealth a lot of times. And what we've learned is most people who give because they're involved. The more you have people involved, the more that they will give. And there's different ways that you can involve people. One of them is to join a committee about fundraising. One of them is to join a committee about how to tell a story. There's just a lot of different ways that you can get people involved. And you can do that by just asking for help. And sometimes it's not just about asking for the dollar, it's about asking for the time and the talent. Also, I'm going to go through this. If you guys have any questions or if you want to spend more time on something, but we're going to go through this, attitudes for success. So, fundraising is a very optimistic field. You're asking for things that, I asked, I'm telling you a $15 million gift. I would love in my lifetime to have made $15 million, let alone ask someone to give me $15 million, right? And so you really have to believe that it can happen, and you have to kind of just think about not necessarily what you're asking for the dollar, but the impact that the person can make, and kind of share that with the prospect. So you should have, and a lot of you already believe this, I can even tell by just talking to you a little bit that I have, you believe in your church, you believe in things that are happening. You also just need to believe people will give. And the one thing that happens is sometimes people think, well, the economy's bad. People don't want to give then. Well, sometimes actually that's when people will step up the most. And so when things are good and bad, they will contribute. The other thing is to step outside your comfort zone. It's hard sometimes to realize that you have so many other demands, and you have, for instance, for me in my world, we have been fundraising from parents a lot lately. And so for me, I look at the parents, and Hopkins tuition is about $60,000. So for me to go to a parent and say, well, congratulations for giving your child coming to Hopkins and the $60,000 bill, can you also give us $5,000 more to help support things? And so for the longest time, I didn't feel comfortable with it. And so I actually had to just start to do it more and to realize that it happens. And we just actually got a $100,000 gift from a parent, and you just don't know where that can happen. So it's really stepping outside of your comfort zone and realizing that if you're not asking for some of this wealth, other people are. Yes?
Is some of the difference there, though, you're not going to necessarily see those parents again or be in a relationship, whereas we're in relationship with these folks day in and day out and in Sunday service. I mean, that plays a dynamic.
It does. So, and the personal dynamics can play that role too. With the parents, we typically look at the parents on like a 4 to 10 year relationship with us, because in all honesty, they move on to something else. Our alumni, though, we hope to have a lifelong relationship. Like I said, I don't see them every week. But in my own dealing with personal donors, I had to have been careful, because we're people, right? And so while my job is to raise money, I care about what I do, and I care about the people I work with. And sometimes when I've become too close, where they will invite me to meet their grandkids or invite me, it becomes hard to have that question. And you never realize the impact that you have on people. And it's ironic, I just shared with Chip, this has just happened to me last week. There was a donor that I worked with for many years. And at where I work, we sign an agreement with the institution saying we won't accept things over $100. And over the years, I've had people want to give me different things. But the most touching thing just happened to me, where this lady I worked with for, I guess, 12 years, sweet, sweet lady, very, very smart. Well, she just passed, and her aunt or her niece called and said Lila May wanted to send in some checks. So the checks came in, and there was a check for my school, another division, and then a personal one for me. And you know, part of me was like, well, let me think. But you know, I actually, just kidding, sort of. But I actually, to me, that was the most meaningful thing that's ever happened to me. Not because, you know, I can't take the money, but that someone thought that much of me. And that happens probably with you all a lot. I mean, you are people who, you know, parishioners come to when things are really good and really bad, and you help them through times. And I think in that same respect, people like to help other people. And it's okay to say, you know, we have this need. I think the most important thing is when you ask, that the person never feels bad if they can't, right? And I think that's the biggest hump to get over too. And so, you know, and if somebody asks you if they only give like a little bit, that's still something. And I think it's showing appreciation for any type of gift, I think is really important. But I think it's really how they feel when they can't do it, and knowing that difference of what is a big ask, what's a regular ask, because a lot of them are already contributing to you on a weekly level. And so it's really kind of to see, like, keeping track of that to know the right time to ask for that larger gift. Okay. All right, so, you know, this is one of the things, is to build a profile about your prospects and your parishioners. And so how many of you have databases where you keep track of your parishioners? Okay, almost all of you. Is it mostly Excel? Is it Razor's Edge? Is it, what is it, Word? Management system? Okay. So one of the biggest things is, as you find out information about people, is just to kind of jot it down and find a place. So, you know, one of the big things is, you know, do they have children? How old? Do they have grandchildren? You know, most grandparents are actually funding their grandchildren's college these years, or they're funding different things for their grandchildren. Personal, like, so, you know, what is the retirement? Do they mention going away a lot? Are they gone from your parish because they're traveling? Just paying attention to some of those things. And one of the biggest things that Chip and I were talking about is, it's not always the person that's dressed up at church. It's usually that person that's not. And it's usually that person. I work with engineers, and I love it, because engineers, and I don't know if any of you are traditional engineers, they usually sock money away. They're not pretentious. They don't like to overspend. They're very meticulous in numbers and things. So you can't really judge the book by the cover. And there's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. And that's just one thing that I've learned. But to also look at, like, have they talked about estate plan? Are they in that place? Are they talking about different things? And, you know, what other charities do they support? You know, do they say they do a walkathon? Do they make contributions? To find out some of that information. And you can do that through a one-on-one visit. You could do it while you're at a bazaar. You can just ask questions. And then if you also have volunteers you involve, that's where your volunteers are most helpful, because the volunteers know most about each other than you may. And it's very easy for them to help you find information.
So how does the growing need for insurance, long-term care, the cost of health and living to old age, how does that impact some of these donors who've traditionally given well, and now we're sitting back and saying, ooh, life is different?
Very much so, actually. A lot of times people are living longer, and they're scared. And they're scared they're not going to have enough money. Typically, when I've worked with people like that, I don't, you know, my job is not to come in as, you know, the mafia and try to get as much money as we can. It's really to make sure that people can fund what their priorities are, and to plan for the future. And so a lot of times the tactic to use there is to talk about bequest, I would. You never want somebody to give something that's going to inhibit them from living the same lifestyle that they want. And so that's typically when I hear those things, I will talk about future giving. And bequest is sometimes the best way to help that.
And just to add a little comment to that, Megan, too, I mean, people now, there's a lot of data that suggests people are making changes to their estate intentions even into their 80s, late. This is, I mean, it's almost a review every 5 years now. It's not a set it and forget it sort of model. And so it's a matter of that being close to and making sure that you're interacting in meaningful ways, if they do have a plan or intention for you, that you remain before them. Because you're right, that's where the biggest growth is, and that's where the most resources are. It's in that wealth transfer, which, you know, whatever trillion of dollars that is right now, that's going to be taking place over the next decade, is very significant.
And one strategy that we use is we have what's called the Legacy Society. And I don't know whether you all do that. So if you do that, please jump in and tell me. So I'm just going to share what we do. So everyone that has said that, you know, our institution is in their estate plans, we'll have a lunch every year to thank them. And we do that for 2 reasons. One, it stays in front of them, but 2, it's just a way to thank them. And you can also build a committee around that. So we'll bring in somebody. We have a chair of the committee that speaks and shares why they decided to do that. And I will tell you, an estate gift, as far as my history, that's one of the easiest asks to make because it's future. And it's not, sometimes people are nervous because it's, you know, it's talking about mortality and death, but it's actually talking about long-term planning and legacy. And if you build that relationship, it's really comfortable. And they'll say no if they don't want to, but at least it's something that you can ask. Yeah, so, you know, the way that we handle estate gifts, at least with our institution, is when those things happen, and they happen quite often, is we usually let that, we don't actually enter into any type of litigation. We kind of, no, yeah. But I think one of the things is when you talk to someone about doing an estate, I think it's really important that you make sure that you're seen as somebody who is offering an option, not a this or that. It's just an addition. Because I think the most important thing is that their family is taken care of. And I feel like if you do the right things happen. As far as, you know, when there's feuding or it's contested, we just let it play out. And sometimes it's years and sometimes, but it's something that we kind of step away from because, you know, family, church, state, you know, we just let the family handle the family stuff. But it does happen. I think as far as changing, people are changing their estate plans. That's one reason why we do the Legacy Society. It's not a public thing that we put up everywhere, but we just invite people to thank them. Now, as he shared, a lot of people do not want to have their name associated or they want it to be private. One of the things then, what I will do is individually, I will thank that person and I will let them know, because the worst thing that I've seen happen over the years is as you work with some of these older people, like many of you people have, is when they designate something and they don't share it, they don't get to see the impact or the possible future of what they can give. And that's a gift that you can give back. And so, you know, I had somebody that wanted to do a scholarship and he didn't want it shared. And so we never shared the amount. But what I did was I took sample letters of scholarship recipients every year and I sent them to him. So he could see what his gift did, because it's his future. And so it might not be that exact student, but one day it would be. And to me, that was kind of more powerful than me just saying thank you or any luncheon. That just showed me this is what you're going to be able, this is what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a scenario that invariably all of us doing this work will encounter at some point. And once you encounter it for the first time, you think differently about the entire process the next time. One, sometimes these can be legacy things that you inherit coming to a congregation. This was done before you ever arrived. But I think the best advice, because we've seen this very recently in our own context, where someone left a significant piece of their estate, they made some very changes, the college was the principal beneficiary, but in the planning steps, you as a church need to make sure that the right people are on the table that have nothing to do with you or your congregation. Whether it's the attorney, whether it's those family members, and sometimes you have to make that difficult call and say, I know what's going on here with these kids. They need to figure this all out together. I would really encourage, perhaps, if you can, you know, have them sit around the table so they all know they're all on the same page, or if it's so toxic that they don't sit around the same table, the attorney issues a letter to those folks, those family members. You know, you want to try and head that off at the pass, because no one wins once it gets to the point of that person being gone. Everybody ends up slinging mud or with mud on their face. And it's not fun. So as much as you can, separate that decision of that parishioner or that individual from you and your congregation, the better off you are.
So I just had a circumstance where someone in the last days of their life told me that they had included the church as part of their estate planning. And what was really nice was that their spouse was in the room. And so I said, oh, and so is your wife aware of this? Oh yes, this is something we're in agreement with. and so he talked a little bit about his children also. And I said, is this something that you've talked to your children about? Oh yes, they know. And so it would seem to me that if we're having conversations about people making planned gifts to the church, so one of the things we might be able to say is, you know, would you be willing to share with your family that this is a plan that you're putting in place, so that it doesn't come up as a big surprise. It could still be debatable, but if the individual would speak their intentions aloud and with others, I don't know, is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a strategy. I think you'll find sometimes, especially as people get older and they switch things, my experience is they get less and less comfortable sharing that piece with other people. And so there's that boundary that you want to respect their comfort level. And so what we do is we'll just ask for just the paragraph of where they have our institution in their will in the first and last page. We do that just to make sure we can follow what they want, because sometimes we'll get estate plans or bequests intentions that are for things that we can't even accept. And so we'll ask for that. And we tell them that we just do that to make sure that we can follow their wishes, and then we just put it in a file. But I think in the case that you referenced, I think it's really important just to make sure that you're careful of what their comfort zone is too, because sometimes they get a little, they're not so sure what they want to share with everyone. So you can ask, but you can't force, I guess. Okay. All right, so we'll move through. So this was just basically to find out about children, what charities they support, what kind of wealth generator, are they still working, do they own something, are they retirees, have they inherited health? So these are just different parts that we look at when we look at the big picture as far as their income level and their wealth. So one of the things is to know the donor. Yes?
Are these slides going to be available?
Yes, because I know we're going through quickly, so we're going to send out the slides to you as well. Yeah, sorry about that. So typically for a major gift that we look at, most donors are over 60 or 70. What we look for is, you know, for you especially, in their weekly contributions, have they started to give more? Is there a spike in their giving? Is there any indicators that they have more that they like to give, or are they, you know, still a consistent donor throughout the time? The other thing is, you know, are they connected with the foundation? Do they mention that they, you know, they have a family foundation, things along that those visions? Do they contribute? Because like we said, most of our donors are actually your donors as well. Are they on an honor roll of a place like an institution, a college? You know, we have these honor rolls that we put out that, and you can just sometimes find it by Googling their name, and to see, are they contributing to other places that you might be able to ask them for more money? And then other institutions. So one of the things about, so you know, you paid attention, you know who your donors are. The other thing is to understand what are you going to ask for, or what is special about your church. So we're not going to talk about how to ask. We're going to talk about what is your case. And so, you know, a problem is opportunity. And one of the biggest things is you should really be aware of your needs and not be afraid to talk about them. And that's one of the biggest things. And so we wanted to do, you know, to come up with a vision and an elevator speech, and, you know, to think about, so I call it focus. You know, you want something far-reaching. You want something that is, what is possible? You want something optimistic, and you want to anticipate the best outcome. You want something compelling. So every single one of us in this room, while, you know, you all are in the same, you know, you're all Methodists, there might be different things in your own parish that might be different than another parish, and to pay attention to what makes it compelling. And then you also want to unify. So what does everyone in your church want to support? And society, so societal. What are you doing to help impact society? A lot of times people want to give to people. They want to give to helping other people do things. And so what I wanted to do is that there's a sheet on your paper, on your table, and it's really to take 5 minutes and to think about your own elevator sheet. And you have to just take the time, make it 2 sentences, no more than 50 words, and then what we'll do is to share. So we'll give you like 10 minutes just to go through that with each other. We'll spend 5 minutes to share it with your table, and then we'll pick one. So pick one for each table, and we'll share that with everyone to see what we come up with.